So nice to see you here with us today. Really pleased and honored to obviously be heading into the beginning of this year in 2024 with so much good news, great partnerships, wonderful collaboration, and a great group here from law enforcement, reintegration, elected officials, our health department. We are really pleased and honored to have the City and County of Denver with us today. As a Denver native, you know, I always tell, I go to the Colorado 9 for movies once in a while, and I always say, well, I was born here. And people are like, well, that's the theater. I'm like, it used to be Rose Medical. So, but I was born there, fifth generation Coloradan, and I always say Denver's success is our success. This is the Denver metro area, and we're really pleased to have Adam Paul from the City of the County of Denver, Cole Chandler from the city and county as well. And also, I believe, Daryl Watson online. I don't know if Daryl, not on yet. Okay, well, we will stand by. I know they're gonna be sharing a little bit with us soon, but you know, our homeless initiative is now off and running. It's been around for, there he is. Oh, fantastic. Welcome, Daryl. I know, we were just singing your praises, sir. We are so pleased to have you. Please have a seat. At the table, I was just thanking the City and County of Denver for being here. You guys, this is the Honorable Daryl Watson from Denver. You know, our Douglas County Homeless Initiative has been focused on the 4 C's for a couple years now, leading with compassion. We always want to be sensitive and careful and thoughtful around those that are unhoused and facing challenges. But then we also think about code enforcement, community services, and communications, getting out that important word to our community. We have an amazing Handouts Don't Help campaign, 67 signs now, I think, Wendy, throughout the county that redirect generosity towards our Douglas County Community Foundation, discouraging people from asking for resources at an intersection which we know is not safe for them or the people rolling down their windows, but making sure that they get the services that they need. We are so thrilled to be celebrating our HEART team, our Homeless Engagement Assistance Resource Team, which is really that beautiful model of a navigator paired with law enforcement that goes out when anybody calls, whether it's law enforcement or a citizen. We now are moving from 3 teams to 5. Thank you, Board of County Commissioners, for supporting that. But again, I think we're really pleased to be one of only 2 counties in the state that's seen an overall reduction in homelessness, but we know that we can do that as a region. And whether it's homelessness or the migration issue, it's a big one. And we really compliment and recognize the difficult work that Denver is undertaking, and we're pleased to be a partner in the Denver metro area. So with that, I just, maybe what we could do is just go around and do introductions. If you want to say who you're from, I know all of you and your friends and colleagues, but if you want to share who you are, and then we are going to go into Winter Shelter Network, HEART contributions. We'll have the City and County of Denver provide a little bit more information on Denver's House 1000 initiative, an update from our HEART team, executive committee member updates, and then public comment. So with that, we'll start with our esteemed public health director, Mike Hill. I always try to come up with a good adjective for you. I hope I'm moving up in the world. Esteemed.
Good morning, Mike Hill, Executive Director of Douglas County Health Department.
Good morning, Laura Hefton, member of Parker Town Council.
Good morning, Deputy Sean Sanchez with Reintegration, Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
Tiffany Marcito with the Supervisor of the HEART team.
Phil Domenico, I'm the captain of the Highlands Ranch Division for the Sheriff's Office, and the HEART team and CRT are now under my charge. We did a reorganization this year with the Sheriff's Office, and so those units have just been recently transferred to me.
Good morning, Daryl Watson, County Commissioner, Denver County.
Cole Chandler, Mayor Johnston, Senior Advisor for Homelessness Resolution.
Morning, Adam Paul, Director of Regional Affairs for Mayor Johnston.
Welcome.
Hi, Dan Marlowe from the Help and Hope Center here in Castle Rock.
Good morning, Erin White with Manor Resource Center.
Hi, I'm Maria Chano. I'm the Executive Director of the Douglas County Housing Partnership.
Good morning, Jason Gray, Town of Castle Rock Mayor. Good morning, Mike Polhemus, The Rock.
Good morning, Dan McKelkey, Human Services.
Abe Layden, County Dog Catcher.
Good morning, Jennifer E.B., Douglas County.
Good morning, Wendy Holmes, Communication and Public Affairs Director for Douglas County.
Jeff Garcia, County Attorney.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. With that, we'll start our conversation today around the Winter Shelter Network heart contribution. And I believe we have Cody Anderson from Parker United Methodist kicking that off. Cody?
Good morning. Yes. My name is Cody Anderson, and I serve as one of the pastors at Parker United Methodist Church. And we were one of the 8 churches that formed the Winter Shelter Network. For 7 years, we opened our doors during the winter months to unhoused women and children. And we were grateful for so many that gave of their financial gifts, their talents, and their time to take care of those who were in need in our community. The churches that formed the Winter Shelter Network continue to support those who are in need, who are unhoused in our communities, and they do that in a variety of different ways. But together, we realized that our time of service had come to an end in the way that we were doing things. As our last act, the Winter Shelter Network would like to give our remaining funds to the Heart Team to help continue to serve those that the Winter Shelter is no longer serving. We are grateful for the work of the Heart Team and believe that they are picking up where we left off and will be able to serve in ways that we were not able to. So thank you.
Cody, thank you so much for that. And, you know, our partnership with the faith-based community is really significant to all of us, and you have done a wonderful job. And, of course, Aaron White and, you know, Dan, all of our faith-based partners, Mike Behemoth, of course, huge effort at The Rock. Couldn't do it without you. And this contribution is really significant. I think part of what we hope is that we can continue to partner with you. And if there's a way to direct generosity from your congregations toward serving those in need, we would love to further that conversation.
Absolutely.
Any questions for Cody? All right. Well, I think we might have Wendy, would you like to share with us? Okay.
May, Jewel, would you like to state this? Right here. All members of the Winter Shelter Network and those representing Heart, can we have you up here for a photo, please?
Oh, and me.
I don't mind at all, as long as I'm on the picture.
It would be a good photo bomb.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy not to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. And I know Cody would be remiss, as would I, if we didn't share the amount. It was $7,000 that you all were able to gather and redirect towards Heart. So thank you for that, that contribution. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to the City and County of Denver to talk about Denver's House 1000 initiative. Who would like to kick that off?
Are we on? All right. So thank you all so much for having us. As I mentioned, I'm Cole Chandler, Mayor Johnson's Senior Advisor on Homelessness Resolution, joined by Adam Paul, who I always want to call Mayor Paul, and the esteemed council member / county commissioner, Daryl Watson. Council member, do you want to say anything as we kick off here? Yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandler and Mayor Paul. I want to thank the commissioners from Douglas County, especially Commissioner Layden, for the invitation. And one of the things I know from our collaborations over the last 6 months, oftentimes Denver County, or there's a sense that Denver County doesn't listen to other counties, that we come without an air of curiosity to learn. And one of the things that I've been trying to demonstrate over the last 6 months, in collaborations with Commissioner Layden and with the other commissioners of the metro area county commissioners, is to really listen, to understand the power of regionalism, the power of the ideas that you are doing down here in Douglas County. And these are things we can learn from in Denver, actually, to grow and to support those who need us the most. So I am very honored to have been invited. I look forward to attending more of these meetings and learning more from you and from the HEART team and the other work that you're doing down here in Douglas County. So thank you so much, Cole.
Well, you'll have to forgive the love fest, but it is almost Valentine's Day, and it's the day before my birthday, so I'm always a huge fan. But I'd love to publicly acknowledge the hard work of Denver and Mayor Johnston and Daryl Watson. I mean, what you've done as a council member and county commissioner, it's remarkable. And when we go to metro area county commissioners and you are there in person and engaged and you're bringing your staff and you've got good statistics and willing to collaborate, what a dream. So thank you for having the courage to run. Congratulations on your victory, and I think we're really pleased to work with you and Mayor Johnston in the future.
Great, thank you so much. So I have a slide deck, and I'm going to kind of walk
Mayor
through.
Paul, too.
Yeah. I'm going to walk through our approach and tell the story of the House 1,000 initiative as we launched it middle of last year. One thing I do want to mention is that Adam and I do have to slip out at the end of our presentation for 10 o'clock that we'll join from the car, but thank you so much for having us and for the conversation this morning. And so I think as I start this, I want to start with a little bit of storytelling. And so in Denver, for the last several years, we've had growing large encampments in our city. If you look back at the point in time count, in 2019, the January 2019 point in time count showed that we had less than 600 people that were living in unsheltered homelessness in Denver County. By the time Mayor Johnston took office in 2023, that number had almost tripled. So it was over 1,400 people. So from about 500 to 1,400 in a 4-year time period. And a lot of times the sort of rhetoric in our city, the conversation around homelessness and encampments was one of conflict. And so I show a couple of photos here as I kind of launch us into this story. On the left is a protest of a homeless sweep. And so there's folks that are there that are going to be moved from their tents that are protesting that activity. And for years, that was sort of the highlight around the ways that the city was engaging with encampments. On the right is a photo from December of Mayor Johnston embracing a woman who was moving into housing from an encampment through our encampment resolution program, which I'll tell you a lot about. And so for me, kind of the story of House 1,000 is the story of moving from conflict to community through transformative public policy. And so I'll talk about that as we move forward here. One thing I want to highlight is this Denver Post editorial board article that came out in early January. The photo is not great because that's a block that now doesn't have tents on it. I wish they had that photo shared there. But the editorial board said that the transformation in downtown is palpable. The transformation in the lives of those individuals who are no longer sleeping in tents gives us hope. And so we hope that you will come to downtown Denver and enjoy it and see that Denver has changed, that as the result of this effort to bring more than 1,000 people off the streets, city blocks look a lot different than they once looked. And Councilmember Watson's district has been at the epicenter of that and the epicenter of the encampment challenges for so long. And it really is a new day in downtown Denver. And so this all started for us when on Mayor Johnston's first day in office, he declared a state of emergency. and activated the city's Emergency Operations Center. One other key piece was that the mayor actually dedicated 10 mayoral appointees to address this particular effort. And so as we stood up this initiative, we created a 10-person team, as well as activating the city's Emergency Operations Center to get this started. The plan from the beginning and the goal centered around an idea of bringing 1,000 people off the streets by the end of the calendar year. And so we had 4 key strategies to doing so. The first, which I'll talk a lot more about, was deploying an encampment resolution program. And so I'll go much more into that. Second, we talked about how do we expand on existing housing resources. And so we brought forward new investments in rapid rehousing. We brought forward new housing choice vouchers to help create additional pathways to permanent housing. The third strategy was around acquiring hotels for non-congregate shelter and supportive housing. And I'll tell the story of some of those hotels that we brought online. And then the fourth piece was around scaling the micro-community model. And so we brought forward 3 new micro-communities throughout this effort as well. And so that was sort of the launch. At the middle of July, first full day in office, the mayor put out a bold goal to bring 1,000 people indoors by the end of the year. There were many times that I'd wished he had stated a lower goal and a longer timeline, but we worked really hard to get it done by the end of the year. And so the first piece was around how did we redesign our encampment response system. And so I've got a few slides here to walk this through. So kind of thinking back to that first image that I showed you of basically protesters at an encampment closure. For a lot of our city's history, there's been 2 activities that have been largely separated. The enforcement activities, which are often led by public safety and public works, and then the outreach activities sort of on the other side. So for 20 years, our city has had outreach teams that go out and do outreach to people in 1 or 2 person encampments or people in large encampments and help bring those folks indoors. And then on the other side of the coin, there's been enforcement activity, closing down camps, moving them along and moving them down the street. What we found was that those 2 existing separate from one another actually did not help us to effectively bring people indoors at scale, and it did not help us to long-term keep blocks closed. Because what happens when you just perform a simple enforcement activity is people move down the street, but all those same people are still on the street just down the block. And so we just moved the problem down the block. And so what we did, and why I call this transformative, is that we brought these 2 things together and created this encampment resolution program where we would go into an encampment with our outreach teams, develop a by name list, get to know every single person that was there, and then ultimately we would say that camp is going to be closed. But every single person in that camp would have an option to move indoors to the hotels and micro communities that we were bringing online. And so we would create a back-end time date by which the camp is going to be closed. In 7 days, this camp will no longer be able to be here, and people have the option to move indoors through the outreach options that were created. Rather than just being moved down the block, we brought together enforcement and outreach. And that's what we call an encampment resolution, which we think is really different than a traditional encampment closure, encampment sweep. We're actually resolving the problem of the encampment. The folks that once lived there do not live on the streets anymore. They now live indoors. And so that's kind of the first piece of that puzzle. This next slide just kind of talks about how we work through that process. And so we have a daily 10 a.m. call, actually, that I'll be joining when I leave here. That's an interagency encampment coordination meeting that's convened by the mayor's office. And so Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. every single day of the week, we have every department from DPD to our housing stability outreach teams to our sheriff's department to Parks and Recreation to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Public Health Department. All these agencies are convening every single day to talk through our city's encampment challenges and how we can create a coordinated response around that. And so that's sort of the daily inputs. We look at 311 calls, we look at 911 calls, we look at all the different things that we need to do to assess the problem and choose areas of the city to engage with. Then as we move towards encampment resolution, we wanted to identify what were the largest encampments in town and how did we identify back-end housing units that people could go into as well. And so we needed to pair an encampment with back-end housing units. So we couldn't close a 100-person encampment with only 40 units. Those sort of resources had to match. And so we would identify those things. And then the fourth piece is that encampment resolution, or third piece is that encampment resolution process that I talked about, and sort of outlining just all the different steps that go into that, leading up to a closure date where we can actually bring everyone indoors and then successfully close the encampment. This took a lot of city staff to do this over the last 6 months of last year. And one of the ways that we did that was actually by redeploying some extra city staff to this effort. And so we needed around 40 FTEs that were explicitly focused on this activity day in and day out. And we gathered some of those full-time employees from human services, public library, public health, and redeployed them to street outreach teams during this time period. They've now gone back to their normal jobs, but they all really enjoyed this experience as well. And so this is just a kind of illustration of some of what that process looks like. And so the green boxes are some of the inputs that we're looking at every single day, the referrals to street outreach, the referrals to DPD, as well as public health assessments, 311 calls, 911 calls. We're filtering all that information and then creating a plan and disseminating that down to the agencies. And so this map shows the areas of town that we conducted resolutions during the second half of last year. And so we actually, it's centered in downtown in many ways, and I'll show you a map later that kind of talks about that. But we also spread this around to actually 4 total city council districts. And so we have 11 city council districts in Denver. 4 of them were a part of this effort to close the 10 largest encampments in the city before the end of the year. And so that's kind of how do we coordinate the response at the street level? The other side is how did we create units on the back end? And so this map shows the 7 new sites that we brought on as a part of this initiative. There are 4 hotels and 3 micro communities or tiny home villages that are included in this map. It spans across 5 total city council districts. And actually the site down at 7525 East Hamden in Council District 4 was our first ever investment in Southwest Denver. And so that was Southeast Denver, a new site, new location for us. And we were proud of that. But we really wanted to work on geographical distribution. Some of that's hard because of just the built environment and where hotels are, especially around the former Stapleton Airport and sort of what that looks like. But one of our goals was not to just over-concentrate this. We sort of recognized that downtown in particular has borne the brunt of this challenge over the last 40 years, that a lot of the homeless services are concentrated in downtown. And part of what we wanted to do was spread that out geographically around the city so that there wasn't quite such an intense concentration. Just a highlight of kind of what those temporary sites that we brought online looked like. As I mentioned, 4 hotels and 3 micro communities. Along with all of these sites, we also have service contracts with service providers to provide wraparound supportive services, case management, really focused on housing navigation. And all that's coordinated through the Department of Housing Stability. The acquisition processes that were required were led through our city's real estate division, which is in our Department of Finance. And so close collaboration really across all agencies, but also close collaboration with our CFO, who was intimately involved in this process as well. And then one other thing that I think is important to highlight is that we worked really hard to engage community throughout this process. And so Mayor Johnston himself attended 60 community meetings from July 22nd through December 22nd. I don't know the math on that. It felt like we were doing it every night, but it was a lot. And so he was out in the community listening, as Councilmember Watson had mentioned, and just making sure that we were hearing people's concerns and thinking about ways to address that. Now, in a public process, no one's always going to feel like they were completely heard. But I think we made a great effort to get out into the community and really be able to speak to what the plan was and engage with as many residents as possible. And so thousands of residents of our city were engaged in that process through those 60 community meetings. So there's sort of that the shorter term strategy of how did we bring on the hotels and micro communities in a quick way. There's other strategies around how do we create longer term partnerships to have actual leased units that people can live in forever. And so we made new investments and some new programs as well. And so one of those was a partnership with an agency called Housing Connector. Housing Connector uses an online database to identify available units that are on the open market. And so then they create relationships with landlords and are a little bit of a conduit between our case managers and service providers and the landlords. And so they have tools that include being able to pay for first and last month's rent and security deposits. They also have some ability to cover damages to buildings that may occur if someone's living there. They're really working hard to help someone get housed into a unit and then stay housed in that unit. And so we created a partnership with them that funds up to 450 units. We invested in 200 new rapid rehousing resources. And so that helps someone go quickly into a unit. We can pay basically the full amount of their rent at the beginning of their time, but then the theory is that over time they are able to pay more and more and sort of wean off that service over a 2-year time period. And then we have, through an ARPA allocation from the state, we won 195 new state housing vouchers, and then through some local investments created 100 new local housing vouchers through the Denver Housing Authority as well. And so in addition to working quickly to bring on temporary resources, also working on sort of the long term of how do we get people into permanent housing and keep them there as well. And so that's how we got folks indoors and continue to do so. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that initiative looks like moving forward. But then I think one of the other pieces of this was that the goal was not only to bring people indoors, but to keep blocks closed from encampments once the encampment had been closed. And so it was really that twofold goal of kind of speaking to both sides and saying, we understand the experience of living in a neighborhood that's heavily encamped is not a great, safe, healthy experience for anyone. And it's not a great place for businesses and all that sort of thing. And we really feel like getting people indoors and access to housing is the solution that we need so that we can just stop pushing this problem down the block. And so what I want to talk about next is kind of now, once a block has been closed, what are our efforts like to keep those areas closed? And so this is a map that shows the areas that we have really identified as being permanently closed to encampments. And so we started in that kind of inner circle of phase 1 and sort of expanded out in concentric circles from there. But really by the end of the year, we were able to close all the large encampments that were in the central business district of downtown. And then along with that, we launched a multi-tiered effort to be able to keep those blocks closed. And so I'm wearing my yellow vest today because this is actually part of that. But we have really brought together some community-based peer outreach services with private security to keep an active presence in these blocks that are closed. And so we have 600 of these yellow vests. They're called our Downtown Ambassadors Program. And so anyone that's working on private security or peer-based outreach while they're on their shift in downtown, they're wearing one of these vests. And it's intended to be visible, something that the general community can see, but also people experiencing homelessness that might be in those areas just kind of have a sense of trust, know that that person is there to help. And so that peer-based outreach and private security are coordinating on a daily basis. What we try to do is when we find somebody that's experiencing homelessness in one of those zones, have a softer touch approach at the beginning that immediately connects them to service opportunities. And through this peer-based outreach, just be able to let people know that, hey, this is not an area that you can camp. And so we can connect you to services or would encourage you to find somewhere else to go. A lot of the peer-based program that we're in partnership with is actually a program that is basically it's folks that have come out of incarceration and are working on their own new careers and rebuilding their lives. And so they just have a lot of direct experience and ability to connect to the individuals that they're speaking with as well. From there, we can escalate things up. We have an unarmed street enforcement team that is through the Department of Safety that can connect with individuals and do some enforcement activities. And then we can also connect with DPD officers as well. But through this effort, all of these folks are coordinated. There's one communication chain. It flows out of that 10 a.m. encampment call, but there's daily communication that happens to address any challenges. And so a few things I would also highlight kind of on the right-hand side of the screen, that map that you saw, that's actually a geofenced boundary through our 311 system. So any call for service that goes into that area is immediately escalated for quicker response and delegated to the appropriate parties. So first to the peer-based outreach or private security before it's being delegated to police. And then I think we're proud that to date, through this effort, we've had to make no camping ban arrests. Even though we've been able to actively maintain the closure of these blocks, we haven't had to do it through a pure criminal justice sort of approach to that. All right. So one of the other things that we did through this initiative was we launched a public dashboard. And this is sort of what we went through a couple different iterations of it, but this is what the final version of that looked like. And so we were tracking the total number of people moved indoors, and then also the total number of people that were still indoors. And so really trying to be transparent around, are we achieving our goal, and are people staying there? And so this is a slide, you can see it's pulled from the 2nd of January. But by January 2nd, we had moved 1,135 people indoors, and 1,113 of those were still indoors, so about 98%. The pie chart shows you kind of where they were at that time. So at that snapshot, about 23% were in permanent housing, about 10% had been in shelter and the non-congregate shelter hotels for more than 30 days. But as you can see, we had a very active month of December. 65% of people had moved in during the month of December. That was a month where we actually performed about 6 or 7 different encampment closures and moved a lot of people in during that month. You can actually go to denvergov.org/house1000 today, and we continue to update this dashboard on a weekly basis. So it updates every Monday. Now the thermometer is over 1,200 people. We're still at about 96% of people indoors. I think over 25% of those are now in permanent housing. And then by far the majority have been sheltered more than 30 days now. So you can kind of see that pie chart as it changes over time. Our theory of change is that the permanent housing resources that we've been working to bring online will help us increase the percentage of the pie chart that's in permanent housing as the year goes along. And so those take a little bit longer to get through that process, but through good case management and with those permanent housing resources, we should see a significant number of people move to permanent housing this year. So that's kind of the first page of the dashboard. The second page breaks it down a little bit more in depth of kind of where people went when they first moved into housing. And you can see that through our encampment resolution activity on the right, we moved about 870 people indoors through that particular program by the end of the year. All right. And so now we're in 2024, in February, actually. And so we have a goal to bring another 1,000 people indoors this year. So we know that this problem is not over with, right? It was a great first effort under the Johnson administration, and there's still a lot of work to do. And so kind of our strategies this year involve broadening our encampment resolution efforts. So you saw that we focused mainly on the central business district. How do we continue to broaden that out to the rest of the city as we go on? Really our big priority is, whereas last year we were focused on bringing new units online, now we want to build upon and support the rehousing system that helps people get through those units. And so we don't want people sitting in the hotels, sitting in the micro communities forever. We want them to have great access to services that helps them get out and into permanent housing. And so really focusing a lot there. We will also increase our number of hotels and micro community units, but that's really a secondary strategy and not a primary strategy. And then a couple other pieces that are important to us is that we want to continue thinking about when those folks in yellow vests are contacting people in closure zones, how can we best link them to low barrier front door sites to get them on a path to services. And so continuing to work to improve that. And then we also have a goal in the administration to add or preserve 3,000 permanently affordable housing units per year. And so recognizing that we do have an affordable housing problem and need to work to address that, and that creates long-term outcomes for people to have access to permanent housing. And so that's a piece of this as well. And there's challenges, as you all know. And so I just highlighting a few of those, obviously just the sustainability and success of this new system. We dramatically expanded the system really quickly. And so we're running through just all the things that you have to do around facilities and operations and supportive services and staffing and all that, just kind of experiencing some of those growing pains and wanting to work through that. Commissioner Layden mentioned earlier, just the new arrivals that we're dealing with. Wanted to highlight that we've experienced more than 40,000 new arrivals since January of 2023. And Adam can certainly answer questions about some of what we're doing on that front. But that's a challenge that we're really feeling as a city and as a region. And so I think that, as people are potentially being discharged from our migrant serving hotels, it creates potential for challenges around encampments. We're grateful that we have not seen a lot of that to date. We have not seen a lot of those encampments popping up, but there have been some. And we've worked through kind of the encampment resolution tools around once people wind up in tents on our streets, how do we work to get them back indoors? And then just ongoing support and throughput for the existing people experiencing homelessness system in Denver. So even before Mayor Johnston showed up, there was a large system serving people experiencing homelessness in Denver, and we want to continue supporting that and working through that. And then I've also mentioned just kind of the system level coordination and ongoing need for affordable housing supply as well. And so with that, I will gladly share the microphone with my colleagues and answer any questions that you may have.
Well, wow. I just have to say that sort of ambitious leadership is truly transformative. And it is such an honor to see that level of literal granular statistic improvement over time. And, Denver is an internationally known destination. It's a very special place. And this great leadership that you're demonstrating will really lead to the vitality that I think we're all hoping to see in the future in Denver. So congratulations. How about a huge round of applause for City and County of Denver? Any questions for City and County of Denver? This is a smart group. I know you have some questions, Maria. Yeah.
Echoing everything you said, this is very impressive. Thank you for coming and sharing all of this with us. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the peer support outreach that's happening. And if you could touch on some of the preservation activities that are occurring, and then the success of the micro units, please.
Great. So one of the things I mentioned was that we have a partnership with an organization that basically their mission is around reentry and serving folks that are being released from incarceration. And so we have contracted with them to do street outreach in the closure zones. And so this was a program that they already had, that they were operating. And most of their outreach, when we met them, was just passing out granola bars and passing out water bottles and just chatting with people on the streets. I think we've created a little bit of a new purpose around how can they actually connect people to services in a better way, and how can we coordinate that, as I mentioned, with our private security, with our street enforcement team, with our police, as a part of a kind of soft touch first approach within these downtown closure zones. But I will say the sort of the philosophy of peer-led outreach is just that folks have the lived experience. They know how to communicate with people that are in that experience in a different kind of way. And so that is something that we're obviously using at the street level, but also something that we utilize in our programs in the non-congregate shelter hotels and in the micro communities as well. We really believe that, people need an access to a roof over their head in order to be able to get their lives back on track, and especially in terms of just being able to deal with mental health and substance misuse challenges. And so having kind of that first connection, being a peer, not somebody that looks down on them, but somebody that can say, I've been there and this is how I got through what you're going through. Many people that are moving in are sort of in pre-contemplation stages on how they want to think about addressing their addiction or mental health challenges. And so just having somebody that's able to build relationships and then can be a bridge to those service systems, we think is a really important tool. In terms of the preservation of units, so that is, so the mayor has 6 or 7 mayoral priorities that we're pushing on for 2024. The 3,000 affordable housing units is actually a second mayoral priority that complements obviously our work on the homelessness front. And so we'll have a number of strategies. The city actually already has within Host's 5-year strategic plan, a goal to build about 1,750 units on an annual basis. And so basically we're adding to that goal by about 1,200. And then really thinking about, what are great preservation strategies to keep units that are affordable from going offline. So many units that are built through public investments maybe are capped at affordability for 15 or 30 years. We don't want to lose those units, especially as we're facing an affordable housing crunch. And so how can we reinvest in those units or keep those units from hitting the open market in order to keep them affordable? Also think about just naturally occurring affordable housing. People that bought their homes 50 years ago, those homes have not been in the housing market in the same kind of way. If those homes start to hit the housing market, it changes they're going to be worth a lot more, right? And so how do we preserve those units and just make them available for people that are teachers and nurses and policemen and firefighters that need access to housing in the community that they serve? And then could you remind me of your third question? Oh, yeah. So we opened one micro community before the end of the year. We have 2 more that are set to open actually at the early March. So they're just about to open. So we'll be able to bring a couple hundred more folks in when those open up, which is exciting. Those sites are really intended to be just like the hotels, a place where people come in from the streets and then eventually transition into permanent housing. We've gotten really good feedback from the first site that opened up. The service provider there is doing a great job and really engaged with individuals. I think one of the things that we hear, people love the hotel rooms, but they also love the units where they can walk out their front door and just be outside as well. A lot of us on the Front Range grew up living in single family housing. And so I think it feels a little bit more like that to someone in a way. And also people that have been living outdoors for a long time, just it sort of complements that and is kind of a good next step. We particularly like that solution just because the cost per unit is low, right, to immediately develop. But it's also proved challenging just to find the land and go through the entitlement process and all that. I think it's taken a little bit longer to build those units than we would have hoped or expected. They are temporary, yep.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'll add one quick thing. I think Cole was remiss. Our micro community process really, and the idea of micro communities was really led by Cole prior to this role. And the Colorado Village collaborative work that he did with sanctioned outdoor sites created a prototype that the city can now leverage. And the success rate of those Colorado Village collaborative sites were beyond anything that we saw within the city as far as transforming the lives of folks who were formerly in unsanctioned encampments, moving into the sanctioned outdoor spaces and actually sticking with the care and the support services long term. And I won't quote the percents, but it was well above where the city was with any other level of housing or sheltering support. And one other thing I would add, I think your prototype with the heart work that you're going to be doing is very similar to our peer focus. And I think really looking at why I know in District 9, which is the district that I'm pleased to serve, is that the folks from the group that is providing that outreach, the granola bars and the water and stuff that they did for the last 6 years with folks in these massive encampments, build a relationship with these folks. The folks trust them. And so when folks from that group goes out for our encampment resolution, they speak to these folks who are entrenched in these encampments. They listen, even more so than the trained professionals that we've hired over time. So I think you see within your HEART program and the work that, I don't know if she's still here, the young lady that presented earlier, the work that they did over years, you find those solutions are much more successful because it comes from a place rooted in love and lived experience, and not so much based on the methodology of how to move folks indoors. They're first leading through that love and curiosity and the hope to help. So I at least wanted to add those 2 other points. I think those 2 are instrumental in the long-term success of our program.
I want to thank you for that. We're big believers in peer support here. I mean, that's evidence-based, and one of our navigators has gone through recovery and has been really in a really difficult circumstance in the past and is pretty public about that. I think it's significant, and maybe something more we can explore here in terms of peer support. Yeah. What other questions do we have for City? I want to respect your time. I know you got at 10 o'clock, so any other questions for Denver?
Rock.
I saw that smile when I said The Rock.
I want that title.
I'm actually not going to ask a whole lot of questions because I know you guys have to go. But I just want to say, in the work that you guys are doing, working with Mayor Johnston on the 1,000 homes, also with just your team, Chandler, and with a team, with the things that are going on up there. I know you guys are kind of in the middle of the storm, and I just want to say, you guys, I have been very impressed, and I don't think you have all the solutions. I don't think anyone has the solutions right now, but I just want to say I think you guys have been very impressive on how you're handling yourselves in this and the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much. And I know with the migrants, I had some questions, but I think that could take you guys past your time here. So I just want to say thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
Well, Mike, we love your questions. So I have Adam Paul is here, and he's helping with that. So ask each one of those questions.
Well, yeah, and I'm actually connected with Adam Paul, so we'll talk more. But you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I know there's an issue obviously with the migrants and how do we solve. I think there's 4,400 was the last number I had that you guys had actually housed, which is fantastic. But then the other 9,000 that are not sure where some of those are. We do know where many of them are, and how do we house those, or how do we move those to safe locations? So questions that I think probably take more than 5 minutes, but thank you guys for all the work you're doing.
Well, and we're easily findable. So as these questions come up, and super grateful for all the support on all these issues that we've received from throughout the region. Just add that these are regional things that we can really solve together, especially as it relates to our unhoused. And so I'm anxious to take what we've learned in Denver to share with our peer communities. I think whether you're in Lakewood, Aurora, Fort Collins, everybody's facing a homeless situation. And so working together, our region has always stood out in this country for coming together to find these solutions. And you saw Aurora just purchased the Crown Plaza Hotel. So I think these things are going to really help all of us as we are able to serve the unhoused and then move into other areas to collaborate. So I thank you all for that.
Yeah. Any other questions? I have a question. How can we help?
Great question. So I think actually the segue from what Adam just said is that, this is a challenge that we're all facing to some degree, right? And so not everybody is facing it as acutely as we are or were in downtown Denver with growing large encampments, but we live in a place where housing is extremely unaffordable and people struggle to pay their rent and people are susceptible of falling into homelessness. And once people fall into homelessness, it's very hard to get out. And so I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is thinking about how can we best support the people that are in our communities already that are facing these challenges. And so, we want to see the programs that you're investing in continue and grow and have success. And we want to be able to share our learnings and share our findings. But we want to see really the entire region working to address this challenge. It's not just a Denver problem. It's not just a city of Denver problem. And so we appreciate everyone stepping up and saying, we want to be a part of the solution together.
That's a great answer. And I'll just say, yes, pleased to do that. I know we've already invested in partnership with Aurora and others in the Regional Navigation Campus. That focus on housing, we call it Housing Plus. Yep, it's that trauma-informed perspective. You got to have shelter, but then the wraparound too, all of 100%. Those supportive services. Yep. Yeah. Any other questions?
And I've got to ask Commissioner Layden, and you and I have spoke about this. the metro area county commissioners are looking at sending a letter specific to the migrant and asylum seeker question. And the letter simply is encouraging federal leadership to look at work authorization. That is an absolute bipartisan opportunity. We know that if folks are coming into this country, if they have the ability to work, our counties, our tax dollars within the state of Colorado won't go towards supportive services. Denver is looking at $180 million possibly of additional impact to our budget. And so the ask for commissioners across the metro area is to consider joining in on that letter and saying, hey, something that has support. I think no matter where you're at, if folks can work, our tax dollars won't be attached to those individuals coming in. So looking forward to possibly collaborating with you and other Douglas County commissioners to see if we can have Douglas County sign on to that letter. And then the second thing is looking at Prop 123. That is not specific to the spectrum of housing that we've been discussing, which is for folks from unsheltered into housing stability. But we know if we have workforce housing, we know if we have affordable housing for the folks working here in Douglas County, we know Prop 123 has targets for each county across the state. And looking at Douglas County, I'm not sure if you have identified it, hey, you are participating in this and building that affordable mix. I think that will be fantastic. So across the metro area that we are all in collaboration on that. I see some thumbs up. So
yes.
Those are the two asks that we had.
Well, I want you to know when you come down here, Commissioner, hopefully you get a lot of good partnership and good things when you go back to Denver. And I'll be the first, if you haven't heard, we did have that discussion as a board and we are a yes. I really appreciate the mayor showing up to MAC and giving us a bipartisan solution to say, absolutely, and work authorization is absolutely that. Reducing barriers for people to access employment is the best form of welfare. That sustainability will last long term. So we're on board with you there. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know you have a 10 o'clock. How about another round of applause for City and County of Denver? Thank you all.
And I'll stick around if y'all don't want to kick me out. I don't have a 10 o'clock.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. And I want to just respect and acknowledge, I know we have a number of individuals that are with us virtually, and I can't see you all, but if you're there and you are interested in introducing yourself, now is a great time to do that. And I do see former Mayor Bob Laguerre. Bob, hi, thanks for being here. I always appreciate our former mayors and mayors. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Hey everybody, this is Mike Wade, the Executive Director of Douglas County Community Foundation online.
Hi Mike, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Yes, Sophia Vihel from Metro Denver Homeless Initiative. I'm a regional coordination lead.
Wonderful. Hi Sophia.
Good morning everyone. This is Amy Will.
Oh, okay. I think we heard you a little bit there, Amy. Thanks for joining us. Oh, okay. And we'll have public comment towards the end, and we'll be pleased to open that up. Anybody else from our working group or executive committee that wants to introduce themselves? Okay, well, thank you again for joining us. So with that, we'll move to our heart update with Tiffany Marcito. Tiffany.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'll just jump in with the activity that the Heart was doing last month. We added on a little section of our activity called Outreach Activity. And basically, we wanted to capture the good work that our navigators are doing when they're not on a call. So if they're at Ridgegate Station looking for individuals who need assistance, or if they're at a park, seeing if there are encampments in the gulches, or if there are people just hanging out, we wanted to capture that proactivity that the Heart is doing in the communities. We received 46 calls that were dispatched by law enforcement. We had 14 community partner referrals. We had 16 citizen calls, 9 public referral forms that were submitted online, and we had 83 different outreach activities that our navigators were doing last month. 68 individuals were contacted by Heart. We had 4 third-party information calls. So if somebody was just inquiring about a shelter in the region, or if they were inquiring about food banks and it wasn't tied to a specific individual, that's how we log those. We had 9 individuals that were non-Douglas County residents and 54 unable to locate, and that could be tied to the outreach activity. So if we were in the Ridgegate station and we didn't locate any individuals or encampments, that would be logged as unable to locate. We had 14 that were not homeless, 3 that were a safety concern. So if somebody was arrested on a warrant or if they committed a crime, we logged that as a safety concern. And then 14 refused services. For the case management side of piece that our navigators are doing, we provided 24 households with case management and referred 3 families to shelter. 1 family was referred to a local food bank and 3 were referred to housing support. We had 4 referrals for mental health services. 7 clients were given transportation assistance from our Heart deputies. And we had a faith-based organization donate a bus ticket to an individual that needed to get back to support in another state. The Heart was able to provide 16 families or individuals with hotel vouchers during the dangerously cold weather event last month. We were able to help an additional 14 households connect to hotel vouchers throughout that month as well. And the story that I wanted to share this month is we received a referral from our friends at the school district for a family of 5 that needed to leave a hotel that they had been residing at for 2 months. The family had a newborn baby and then another child with extensive medical needs. The mother and father were employed, but due to unforeseen circumstances, they weren't able to afford to live in the hotel anymore. So they reached out to us for assistance. We helped them with immediate needs. The mother was proactive in reaching out to Metro-wide services for her family. And while she was doing that, we helped guide the family to regional housing organizations. And within a month of their intake, they had a transitional housing unit open up for them. So that was huge. And while they were, while they were waiting for their unit to become available, they had a future date, move-in date. The Heart was able to provide them with a safe, warm place to stay so they wouldn't have to live in their vehicle during the frigid month of January. This family has also been connected to social workers within their transitional housing unit. And so their program will ensure that they progress from their current housing crisis to a functional level of stability. So that was a huge success last month for us. Any questions for me?
Wow. Any questions for the Heart team? Well, once again, in Valentine's Day, I'll be thinking about a huge heart, our Heart team. How about a big round of applause for all those success stories? I know we'll be actively sharing that with the community, and Wendy will be telling those stories well. You know, one of the things we talked about, you know, of course, as we wrap up here today, is this is such a rich room of individuals with expertise and knowledge in your respective areas. And, you know, as much as we appreciate the presentations, we appreciate each of you the most. And I think if there are ways in which we can improve, reshape, modify, and improve upon the homeless initiative, we really welcome that input. So at this point, just wanted to open it up for the executive committee member updates with any updates from your departments, perspectives, ideas, or thoughts you'd like to share with us. Mayor.
Thank you, Abe. Nothing too much, but we had an abandoned camp cleanup. I think it's the only cleanup we had this month. We cleaned that up as a town. Also want to thank a lot of people in this room. I recently reached out to Dan and Jen and Maria and Art and a couple other people about a homeless couple in town that I had bumped into and talked to a little bit. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way I wanted to, but I do want to thank everybody who helps. That's like the 3rd time now that I've been able to reach out to you guys. I know that when I reach out to you, you guys follow through. So I really, really appreciate that. And just a little bit of an update. About 6 months ago or so, the school district and Douglas County Housing Partnership, as well as Dan and Jen and others, helped out a teacher, and she's doing really well now, and just, it feels a little more stable. And she wanted to thank everybody for all the help. Reached out to me, and just very appreciative of all the help that she was getting. So just want to thank everybody.
Well, way to follow the theme there. You talk about a mayor with a huge heart. This man not only owns the local coffee shop, but he knows his citizens very well. So thank you for personally engaging with those that we both serve. Appreciate that. Dan?
You know, one thing that I wanted to follow up that Cole said of how easily it is for people to fall into homelessness and how hard it is for people to get out of it. And one thing I would like to say is we are still experiencing unprecedented numbers of people applying for public assistance in Douglas County. We have the most people we've ever had in history on food assistance, the most people we've ever had on Medicaid, and that is not declining at all. The numbers of people applying for those services are something that we were not actually prepared for. And in the Denver metro area, that is resounding through all, with not just Denver, but Arapahoe, Adams, Jefferson. All counties are reporting just a significant amount of people who are applying and also not being able to come on food assistance and Medicaid due to their income just being a little bit too high. And so then you have families living in this middle ground of how do they provide food and shelter and medical assistance to the individuals and families within their community. I would say what his words were so dead on about you see how families and individuals can quickly fall based off of really trying to work on their own. Most of the people that we serve in all of these, and most of the people that I've met that are unhoused, were working at some point. Their car broke down. There's a lot of reasons why, but I like to bring that stat to this group every month of we're not seeing a slowdown at all in the applications. We're not seeing a slowdown for people coming to the department just through the lobby. I have great resources in the lobby. Deputy Sanchez is in the lobby with us one day a week. It's amazing what we're seeing come through. This community is no different than any other community when it comes to people in need.
Our amazing Human Services Director, Dan McKelkey. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Any other comment, Maria?
So the housing partnership is involved with a lot of the people around this table and throughout the community. We're launching it's called the Thor Grant, Transitional Housing Response Grant through the state that is small, but a beginning here that is starting this year in 2024, that we'll be working with our nonprofit partners to provide navigation services to folks and help them find somewhere to settle in if they've been experiencing homelessness. So that's one thing that we're working on right now. Of course, as most of you all know, all 5 jurisdictions that are members of the Housing Partnership did certify for Proposition 123. I'm so very proud of that. And in addition to certifying and making that commitment to increase the affordable housing stock, we're also continuing to work on an intergovernmental agreement so that we are able to do this together and really set an example of the regional partnership in what we're doing here. So we're continuing to work on that, and we'll continue to share as we have updates in the next few weeks and months to come. We are waiting on the IGA to be finalized, but that's not stopping our efforts. We'll be meeting and being on the State Housing Board next week to talk about the down payment assistance, which, as many of you know, will be, I hope, revitalized through the Proposition 123 being able to provide assistance to home buyers at a higher income level. And we know that with the low housing stock and the housing costs that are so very high and so many people experiencing rent burden, every little thing helps, every opportunity, every time we're able to move someone, they're renting an apartment that's naturally affordable, we're able to move them into a house if we're able to find and preserve that naturally occurring affordable housing, it helps along the continuum. So we're continuing our focus there. And so much more. It's very, very busy. We're working with Dr. Cog on the regional housing needs assessment, and it sounds like we're getting close to wrapping up and having data, and we're working with them to be able to get more local data and customize some of the findings to what we are looking to do in the next coming years. So much more, but I think those are the highlights for this group. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me. Thank you.
It's huge. We have such amazing people in Douglas County. Thank you, Maria. Thanks for all you're doing. Any other updates? Yeah, Dan.
Just one, we want to just say thank you to the commissioners for very generous support financially of the 5 food pantries here in Douglas County. That was unexpected and really fun. So we're grateful for that. Just to echo what Dan was saying, we were up, I forget the exact percentage, but 24,000 people last year walked through our doors. 2 years ago, 29,000 last year. So that, 2 years ago, I thought we were maxed out. And last year, it was just crazy. And it hasn't let up. It's not letting up yet. And so I just have a question, and I don't have any knowledge in this area or how all of this works, but in terms of affordable housing, is there anything that could be done in terms of tax, so income tax, county tax that people pay in order, that group in the middle, right, that we're talking about, who they make too much for federal programs, but not enough to not be sort of on the cusp all the time. I don't know if there's any kind of tax credit or deductions that could be looked at that would make their overall burden on the rent less. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
It totally does, and I'll try to be brief, but property taxes are a whole other issue that the commissioners are very active on. Sitting as the Board of Equalization, we did do a record-setting adjustment to home values. It was overturned by the state. We are in litigation to hopefully get that squared away, but we're sensitive that this is the highest level of property taxes in the history of Colorado. But let's note that. I think that's maybe something for future discussion if we could target a particular group with a need. I always like tax credits, so I don't want to speak for my board, but I think great to hear that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also huge thanks, Dan. We believe in return on investment, and every dollar that we put into our food banks really benefits our community. So thank you for being a great partner. Appreciate that. Yeah, you could totally, yeah. Maria could probably answer that question much better than I could.
So as far as housing goes, there's a few things. So the low-income housing tax credit program now has opportunities for income averaging, where it used to be that you had to be at or below the 60% AMI to be able to qualify. Now there's options where you can qualify at up to 80% of the AMI, and that just has to average out into the 60%. So that will allow developers and owners who choose to use that type of program to serve 30% through the 80% based on need. So there's that piece. And then the Proposition 123 down payment assistance that I mentioned before is getting us higher into that income level that you're describing, where folks that normally wouldn't qualify for the assistance because they made too much are now going to be able to access some of that funds to be able to put down on a home that they never have been able to before. And additionally, the amount that we're able to contribute is growing as well, thanks to Proposition 123, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so we're curious to see what that will look like. I know that there's other things that we're looking to see. How can we help? There is a middle income housing authority that has been created that is unique, and I haven't seen too much in terms of how the pilots are working and other things of that nature, but that's something that we are watching and just trying to learn more about, and always looking to see how we can serve the entire housing continuum and make sure that folks at all income levels have opportunity for housing and housing stability, and that of course we're finding ways to preserve the housing that's already there. Sure, there's more I could tell you, but I think that's the main gist of what I know.
This is good. Maria and I could go on a little roadshow, I think, on workforce housing, housing affordability, but I'll just add, this might be a good place for this group to plug in too. I mean, as commissioners, I'm sure Commissioner Watson does this too, but we monitor, about 600 bills that come through the legislature through our lobbyists. And, there's this active conversation around construction defect. And SIDARA reform I spent my career as a commercial real estate attorney. We've been waiting for that for 15, 20 years. And the point is, if developers can do more condos and condo conversions, people that can't afford a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom plus home, maybe they can afford a 1-bedroom condo with a bath. It's still going to be pricey here, but if we can reduce those legal hurdles to build condominiums, that may be important. So, if this group wanted to take a position on a bill, we could certainly do that too. So, yeah, Mike?
Just kind of laughing because in my development years, as we developed up and down the Front Range of Colorado, that was one of the big issues, was the construction defects. And so basically all major home builders just shut down building those things because it wasn't worth the after effect, the cost that you had to pay with the attorneys to go through the construction defects. That's not why I just wanted to echo actually what Dan said and just say thank you to our county commissioners and to Douglas County for their for the funds that they've used to fund into the different food banks. I was just thinking about it as Dan was talking about it. I think the first one was back in 2020, and we received a call from Douglas County, from the commissioners saying, hey, we want to help the food banks. This was when we just had a small little food bank, and it launched us into, because of those funds, it actually launched us into the next level to where now we're doing over 400,000 pounds a year of food distribution to so many families across this region. But then to have this second round that came in, which was totally unexpected, we weren't even asking for it, although I think definitely necessary with all the rising costs and the things that are happening. And we're not seeing the numbers decrease, we're seeing the numbers increase. So I just want to say a huge thanks to you guys. You really care about the community, and it's evident just for all the entire county. I just see such a care to see this county impacted in a positive way, to reduce just especially now with what we're seeing with the costs going up, with just to help with all the stuff that's happening around here. So anyway, just another echoing the thank you for all you guys are doing.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to partner, and I'll just share that thanks. I mean, the thanks really goes to Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Teal and the late Commissioner Partridge, because
Yes.
It was all three of us that really said our food banks need that help and support. So, yeah, thank you for that. Additional comments, questions? Yes, Councilwoman Laura Hefta from
Trying to jump in before I have to jump out here. So in Parker, we've had some success. We've had a major business decide to issue some trespass letters and get those folks moving on their way and assist them. We've also been able to hire more law enforcement in our budget, which greatly helps this homeless effort. And we've also been able to get a legislative committee together now in Parker. We're now tracking bills such as that bill with the ADU issue and whatnot. So these are very important things. We're now able to take a position We have a lobbyist at the legislature. So these are the things that local town councils can do throughout the state with some of that money. But we are making progress in Parker. I wanted to state that.
Well, that's why we're such a huge fan of our mayors and our council members and our municipalities. Listen, we know that Parker was dealing with some overnight parking issues, and we really want to thank you, Laura, for engaging and working with those businesses to resolve that. That's a big deal for us. That helps with our point in time. So, anybody else?
I did want to mention, we have a prevention and diversion work group that started, I think, last meeting or the meeting before, maybe last meeting, and wanted to give Rand an opportunity to give us an update on that because I think some really good momentum happening there.
Great. Rand?
Thank you, Jen. Rand Clark representing staff. It is, if you remember, Douglas County received $50,000 through Proposition 123 to start a pilot project in the space of housing diversion and prevention. We recognize that one of the ways we can impact homelessness is by helping our residents who are housed stay housed and not enter into that state of homelessness. And so through this group, some of you are in the room today. We've met twice now as a housing diversion prevention work group to begin building a pilot project to utilize that $50,000. And so we've met twice now over the course of the last month. We are kind of honing in on a target population that we can serve using those funds over the next year. We're looking right now at what we would call kind of medium barrier families, so not the highest, most challenging level of families, but families that do need some help in order to remain housing and some just not funding, but case management and supportive services to kind of get back on that right track. And then also potentially as a subset of that, those families who are victims of domestic violence who have additional sort of challenges around maintaining their housing. And so more to come. We are meeting about every 2 weeks right now. And we hope to come back to you in the next month or two with an idea of a program design and model around a pilot project to help those in our community stay housed and divert them from ever experiencing homelessness. So we're excited about that project and look forward to bringing you more information in the future.
Wow, great job, Rand. You know, we started this under the notion of, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And we've been building, but I think Rand is one of those that's getting us real close to perfect with all the great work and the additional efforts. So thank you for that. Any additional comment from our executive committee or staff?
We also have Mike Wade online.
Mike Wade online, our Douglas County Community Foundation. Hi, Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. I just wanted to give everyone a quick update on the Douglas Has Heart Fund that the Douglas County Community Foundation maintains on behalf of this program. And just to remind everyone, when someone goes to douglashasheart.org, they're taken to the county's page to describe the program, and they're presented with an opportunity to make a donation instead of handing out money at the street corners. So when those donations come in, they come into Douglas County Community Foundation. We manage and maintain that fund with zero cost to the county so that 100% of the funds that are donated are used back to the organizations working to help fight homelessness in Douglas County. Just a quick update, we are about halfway to our next distribution dollar amount, so that's great news. Over the last year and a half, we've had donations come in ranging online from $25 to $1,000. And so people able to announce our next distribution fairly soon.
Mike, that's amazing. And not only are you the director of our community foundation and the guy with the big checks that we see all the time, but the reason we're not paying for the administration of our Douglas Has Heart campaign is because Mike is administering it himself and not charging us. So Mike, thank you so much for that additional work. I know it's not easy, but it makes a huge impact.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay, anybody else? Executive committee, staff? Okay, with that, I'd love to open it up for any citizen comment. If there's any citizens that are here that would like to share with us, the podium is right there. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I wanted to say good morning, and I also wanted to acknowledge that Commissioner Layden, your love language is definitely words of affirmation. So thank you so much for that, and I'm very similar to that as well. I wanted to say thank you so much to everyone here in Douglas County, and also with the City and County of Denver for being here. Your collaboration, your communication that you provided today is noticed, especially to our citizens. This definitely shows the efforts that you guys are making to serve and protect our citizens. So again, I say thank you. On behalf of all of our citizens here, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you to everyone who's at this table, everyone who's out there, and everyone who's online. Your time, your effort, and commitments are definitely noticed, so valuable, and I'm truly grateful. And since Mike just spoke, I want to say that on behalf of a citizen, that's a great place to donate money, and I really encourage people to do that to the Douglas County Community Foundation. So thank you.
Catherine, since we share the same love language, I'll just say huge thanks to you and all of your great community service on a lot of levels. Appreciate it. Any other citizen comment? Okay, well, we've had a really great meeting. Let me make sure there's no citizen comment online. Is there any citizen comment online?
I do have one more comment from online that was shared with Jessie. She had a question or maybe a comment. As a church, where can I have volunteers go to help with hands-on services?
Talk to Dan Marlowe from the Help and Hope Center. He's right here. Yeah, or Mike Behemoth from The Rock.
We have a couple faith-based organizations that would be very interested in receiving assistance. Dan Marlowe raised his hand from Help and Hope, and The Rock, I think, would also appreciate some volunteers. I also would want to direct you to our faith-based initiative and to Rand Clark to kind of help direct your efforts through the Heart team, if that is something that you're interested in. So I know that comment came from Jessie, and Jessie, we will provide you with some contact information.
And it's all on our website too, at douglas.co.us, if you look for the homeless site. Okay, any additional public comment? All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for such a rich and robust meeting. Have a wonderful rest of your day.